There's some things that have been happening in Ohio that I think you need to be aware of, and I want to bring on, if I can right now, Joshua Arnold. He's the senior writer with the Washington Stand. Joshua, thank you for hanging out and for coming on Washington Watch.
Hi, Jody. Happy to be here.
All right, let's go to the Supreme Court has been in Ohio, has made some pretty significant calls here recently on the transgender issue. Bring us up to speed.
That's right. Ohio is one of 27 states that have passed protections for minors, protecting them from gender transition procedures. As has been the case in many of these states, some liberal activist lawyers sued. They got an injunction against, or they got a ruling against that law. An appellate court in Ohio ruled that it was unconstitutional and ordered the lower court judge to issue a permanent injunction that would keep the state from enforcing this law. The state appealed to the Supreme Court. They asked for an emergency stay that would allow them to continue enforcing the law while the appeal proceeds. And this morning, the Supreme Court of Ohio granted that stay.
Wow. All right, so what's next? Sometimes all this legal back and forth can get very confusing. What's the next step in all of this?
In fact, it's particularly confusing in this case because the ACLU that challenged the law disagreed with the state about what the proper appellate procedure was. So the Supreme Court, it looks like, has stepped in to straighten that out and said, okay, pause on all lower court actions. We've got the ball now. And now it's going to be the Supreme Court of Ohio hearing an appeal by Attorney General Dave Yost, who's been on this program before, right, about that law to protect children from cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers, which have irreversible effects.
Well, there's just so much taking place on this one issue alone, and so many different issues. But this is a big one that we're so thrilled there's momentum here. And for example, the Trump administration, the Department of Justice, has reversed the Biden administration's support of prison inmates having transgender surgeries. Tell us about that. What has the Trump administration done here?
That's right. It was actually suits brought by prisoners in Georgia state prisons against the state of Georgia, and the Biden administration Department of Justice intervened to file what are called statements of interest, claiming that by not allowing these prisoners to get taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries, the state of Georgia was violating the Americans with Disability Act and the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishments. That's obviously ridiculous. The Trump administration Department of Justice, its Office of Civil Rights, has now reversed those statements of interest and pointed out that actually no, there's no law that requires taxpayers to pay for gender transition procedures, especially surgeries for prisoners, and that's going on with a whole sea change there in the Department of Justice that the Trump administration is bringing about.
You couldn't have said it any better. The sea change is happening across the board. Joshua Arnold, senior writer at the Washington Stand, thank you so much for this update that is unfolding today.
Thanks,
in Ohio. Thanks for joining us.